Hello, friends. This is Pastor Christopher Marundi. Very glad to bring you the second half of our interview. I'm the director of the Lutheran Institute of Regenerative Agriculture, and it's my great joy to have with me Howard Vlieger. And he's a farmer and a consultant, and he's working with non-toxic herbicide. We'll talk a bit about that in this part of the interview. And he is above all defined as a student of the soil. And we're very glad to have you with us today, Howard.
Thank you once again, Pastor. It's my pleasure to be with you and share some information.
So in the first half, we talked a lot about a study that you were a part of. Really, you were providing the animals that went through the study of of GM feeding GMO grains to pigs, and we talked extensively about that. And in the break in between, I realized that we never really defined on a very foundational level what is GMO. What exactly is that? And so if you could just spend a couple minutes just telling us what for both the person who has maybe heard this label before, maybe seen it on non-GMO on a bag of chips or something, what exactly is GMO? What does that mean?
GMO, the primary definition of it is genetically modified organism, genetically engineered. GE is another abbreviation that would, in essence, be the very same thing. When they develop a genetically engineered or a genetically modified organism, they are taking a characteristic from somewhere in nature and inserting it into a plant. And genetic engineering is more than just insertions into plants. They've expanded that now to injections for people, that they're using genetic engineering for injections. But for plants, we'll focus on BT, for example. Bacillus thuringiensis is a natural occurring soil bacterium that will, if a corn borer ingests that material, it will kill them. It causes their gut to explode, literally, and they die. You can use a natural version of BT and spray it on a crop if you have pests, and it will kill the pest once they ingest it. And once it's done, it returns to the soil and is not harmful. The BT version of the Bacillus thuringiensis, there was one study that came out of Canada where they saw that it was 2 growing seasons after the genetically engineered or GMO crop with the BT had been planted, they could still document the presence of that genetically engineered version. Then they went on to put a trait into plants that also worked for rootworm. So you had a double BT, if you will, or they called that the CRW. They also have developed processes for genetic engineering where they can make them tolerant to different herbicides. Glyphosate-based herbicides, glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup, which the Roundup ready crops are the most widely used herbicide tolerant crops in the world. There's also Liberty Link or glufosinate resistant crops. Both glufosinate and glyphosate, or Roundup and Liberty, are non-selective herbicides. They're basically going to kill anything they touch, with the exception of a few species that they don't work on. And only the crop that is resistant to it will survive. That they do not do anything in the genetic modification to deal with the adverse effects of the glyphosate, which is a long conversation in and of itself. But the chelating effects, the antimicrobial effects, the synthetic amino acid effects, none of that is dealt with in the genetic engineering when they develop that hybrid to tolerate and withstand or not die when that herbicide is applied to it. Dr. Arpad Pusztai again, I'm privileged to have been mentored by him. He is now in heaven with our Lord, as he passed away a number of years ago. But he helped me fully realize the way he explained it to me was like this: Howard, I worked with potatoes, and this is him speaking now. He says, if I take a gene out of this potato, insert it into this potato that's already there, it shouldn't change anything, but it does. It is the process of the insertion where there is a disruption of the DNA makeup of the plant, what molecules are damaged, what molecules are displaced, and what is the resultant effect of that. In essence, you have a very high likelihood that you are going to see a development of a foreign protein in the fruit of that plant. When that foreign protein enters the digestive tract of a mammal, two-legged, four-legged, or whatever in between, the digestive tract doesn't know what to do with it. More to the point, the immune system. It's estimated 80% of our immune system is in our gut. That's our microbiome. When that foreign protein enters the gut, an alarm goes off. Foreign invader, do something, do your job. And the way I demonstrate this when I do the full-length GMO education presentations, I'll lean against the wall at a 45-degree angle. And I'll say, okay, I'm the immune system. I just detected this GMO that's entered your digestive tract. I'm going to put all of my energy into getting rid of this. So imagine if I'm pushing against this brick wall for 24/7, 365. You come back 24 hours later, what's going to happen to my strength? It's going to be weakened. Why do we have so many immune issues and autoimmune issues in the population in our country today? And that foreign protein, Dr. Pusztai said that is the number one warning signal that everybody should adhere to relative to the GMO going into the food supply. And he was very concerned of how we would see escalating health issues once we got into the second and third generation of mammals after the introduction of this into the environment. Because you likely know that when a baby girl is born, all of her eggs of all the children she may have are on board when she arrives. Well, when that foreign protein affects the parent, it's going to also affect the offspring. And GMOs are very much a problem in the health of many babies that are born today. And glyphosate is even more significant in its role as far as causing problems in that same respect. There was one study in Washington State where they demonstrated that glyphosate injected into female rats when they were carrying babies affected 14 generations of babies.
So you are, well, let me ask this question first. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time, but I think it's important. So we've touched on the health effects, I mean, it's primarily the health effects and the nutritional effects of genetic modification. Do you have ethical, moral, maybe even spiritual concerns of modifying creatures or plants with genetic modification?
Absolutely. GMO, genetically modified organism, is one abbreviation. GMO, God move over. They are literally playing God with what they're doing, not only to plants, but it's even more insidious with what's happening with the genetic engineering of babies the CRISPR technology that's already been implemented. There were 2 babies born in China. Nobody knows what has happened to them since they have been born. The mRNA injections that have been introduced to the world without any safety testing whatsoever. Everybody that took it as part of the study, so to speak, totally, completely immoral, unethical in every way, shape, and form. I know where I'm going when I die. I'm going straight to heaven thanks to Jesus, and I know there will not be any GMOs in heaven.
So you've been working with so we talked about the, and of course, GMO and the herbicide, the glyphosates, as you just described, go very much hand in hand. They're two sides of the same coin. They work together. And so you here very recently, and even today, are working with a company that has developed what you called earlier a non-toxic herbicide. I assume developed as kind of an alternative to glyphosates and those sorts of things. Hey, give us the rundown on that. What exactly does that all involve?
As I said, I've been blessed to work with scientists from around the world on GMO, glyphosate, and other chemical residue issues. In 2015, I received an email from one of my scientist friends, Dr. Maywan Ho. She sent the email to myself and Dr. Huber, flagging up a company from Australia that had developed a potential replacement for Roundup. I read everything there was on the website. There was a contact button on there, so I pushed that and sent a message to them and started the conversation and the discussion. And the first question I asked Peter, who was the accountant at that time, I said, well, how does the product affect the soil? Because on my journey of never-ending learning process of how the soil works and what is damaging it to what effect, I've read countless studies on the damaging effects of glyphosate. So if I'm going to use something in place of it, I want to know how that's going to work and how it's going to affect things. They had no idea how it affected how the product affected the soil. So after I started the U.S. division of the company, I reached out to another scientist friend, Dr. Bob Kramer, who was at that time still working for the USDA as an ag research scientist based out of Columbia, Missouri. I said, if there's ever an opportunity to do a head-to-head comparison with our product and Roundup to measure the effects on the microbial population in the soil, I said I'd be very interested. A couple, 3 months later, he calls me up and he says, Howard, there's an opportunity for you here at the university. They're doing a study on any and all organic herbicides they can find, and you could participate in that. And I said, well, does it have to be certified organic? Because our product isn't as of yet. He said, no, it doesn't. And I said, well, what about the comparative study with the Roundup? And he said, let me talk to the lead researcher. He did. He came back to me and he says, yes, we can do that study. Long story short, it was a 2-year study. It was supposed to be 1 year, but the weather conditions were unusual. So the researcher says, we're going to do it another year. And many people who are aware of the term glyphosate, which is the active ingredient of Roundup, know that there are countless scientific studies that prove that glyphosate has a very adverse effect on beneficial organisms wherever they are present. Primarily, this research was done in the soil. Glyphosate also has a very adverse effect on beneficial organisms in the digestive tract of mammals. Glyphosate also has a promoting effect of opportunistic or disease-causing organisms in the soil and in mammals. So we did the head-to-head comparison using our non-toxic herbicide products compared to glyphosate. Long story short, glyphosate did what it always does, diminished the good, promoted the bad. Our product did just the opposite. There was an increase in the beneficial organism population and a subsequent decrease in the disease-causing organism population. So we killed the weeds and made the soil healthier. How we do what we do, we have developed technology and formulation to make organic acids consistently effective as a contact herbicide. The mode of action is desiccation by dehydration. With the organic acids and the natural oils and the emulsifier wetting agent composition, we spray that mixture. We mix the concentrate up with water. We spray that and get complete coverage of the spray material on the foliage of the plant. The acid breaks down the protective surface of the plant. All the nutrients and the moisture escape, and the plant dies as a result. On annual species, we have a 94 to 98% efficacy rate on most annual species. On perennial species, it may require a sequential application or applications, depending on what the species is. It is not a silver bullet. It does not kill anything and everything, but it is not systemic like many synthetic herbicides are, but there's no adverse residual effect. And it's, I have sprayed every glyphosate resistant species I can find, and I can't find one that our product has not been able to control. But then most people don't realize that glyphosate doesn't actually kill weeds. It just gives the plant a bad case of AIDS, to quote Dr. Huber and Dr. McNeil, because it shuts down the plant's ability to push growth hormones, and it shuts down the plant's ability to protect itself, making it susceptible to disease that is promoted by the use of the glyphosate in the soil. So it shuts down the plant's defense mechanism. We have an immune system, plants have a defense mechanism, and that's how it works. So when a species is supposedly resistant to that herbicide, it isn't resistant to the herbicide, it is resistant to the disease that used to kill it. And that's why they call them super weeds when the glyphosate or glufosinate or other herbicide are in those two specific categories. They literally are driving the development of the super weeds because of that mode of action and how it's designed to work. And I've asked the weed scientists about our product, okay, is that resistance development possible? And they say 99.9% no, it won't, because it's a completely and entirely different mode of action. Another reason that we, in our research, ongoing research, will further document this, but we believe we're driving all the good things from that weed into the soil and feeding the beneficial organisms in the soil, because all the sugars, I don't have to tell you the benefit of photosynthesis and having a plant growing as much of the year as possible in the regenerative space. Well, if we're driving all of the goodies from that weed and or cover crop and or whatever else into the soil to stimulate that microbiome, Dr. Ingham would say, well, it's just like giving them cake and cookies. They go, wee, we're going to have fun.
I have a couple nuts and bolts questions with regard to this product. So the great promise of GMO paired with glyphosate is that you can just spray it and it'll kill everything but spare the plant that you want. How, I mean, with what you're developing, how does it not harm the plant you want to keep?
Well, our product at this point in time is used as a spot spray, directed spray, primarily. We're high value crops or vineyards where they're spraying in the row. We're also using the product for sucker management in vineyards. We can say you don't want any suckers from 3 foot down. We can spray the base of that plant from 3 foot down, take all the suckers off, and have no adverse effect to the vine. So it's used as a pruning tool. Um, we're not using it at broadacre as of yet, but we are working towards achieving that because we want to be able to use it as a termination tool for cover crop. You plant your multi-species cover crop in the fall, and in the spring you want to plant small grain crop, corn crop, whatever you're raising. You need to come in here with a non-selective product and terminate it. That's where our product will be used once we have demonstrated the success. I'm blessed again to know so many amazing people in the scientific and the regenerative ag space. Gabe Brown is a good friend of mine, and he challenged me 3 years ago. He says, Howard, he said, you get that product to work consistently effective at $70 an acre or less. And he says, I got people lined up to use it because there's a large number and a growing number of people that may be using glyphosate that absolutely do not want to, but they feel they have to. Thankfully, more and more people have figured out alternatives to not use it, but there's a huge audience, if you will, waiting for a consistently effective, non-toxic termination tool for cover crops and or wherever else, even if you don't have a cover crop, to terminate what vegetation you have before you would no-till plant into that environment.
Yeah, and I've talked to farmers even on these very webinars who to terminate cover crops use glyphosate. So, and I think they would be very interested in something different. The other note and that Gabe Brown mentioned to you was the cost. How does it compare to these synthetics, to glyphosate and others?
It will be higher priced from an application standpoint. I have a question for you. What's the true cost of the cheap herbicide known as glyphosate? I can show you countless scientific studies that show the chelating effects, nutrient tie-up, and resultant deficiency in nutrition in plants and subsequent fruit of the plants, grain and or forage harvested. I can show you countless scientific studies that demonstrate the adverse residual effects of the glyphosate residue to the microbiome of mammals. I can show you countless scientific studies of how glyphosate causes liver and kidney disease and how it causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, irritable bowel, leaky gut, Crohn's disease, ileitis. What's the cost of treating all that? So tell me, what is the true cost of using this cheap herbicide? And to directly answer your question, it's going to depend on the density of the crop at this point in time. Right now, it at its current registered, approved for sale in the United States form, it's not feasible for most operations. Now, that being said, I use it to terminate my cover crop on my garden every spring. Because again, I'm growing food and I'm wanting nutrient density. I'm not focusing on pennies. I'm feeding what comes out of that garden to my grandchildren, and I don't want to feed them poison. So cost is not an issue, but you're never going to make a non-toxic, consistently effective product as cheaply as you would a synthetic. But what is the true cost?
Yeah, and that's you weigh all those things. You see, yeah, what are the costs of the input, rather, compared to what am I losing on the other end? Not just in a dollar and cents figure, but in a whole bunch of other measurables.
Agreed.
I want to shift gears a little bit. I don't think we have a huge amount of time left, but I want to talk just briefly because again, I mentioned this at the beginning. I think it's interesting to those who are watching this and following what we're doing. A big part of what we do in the Lutheran Institute of Regenerative Agriculture is encourage local food and ag entrepreneurs and that sort of thing. So I want you to just summarize, and of course this is a very big topic. So just summarize a bit what you've learned from the food to table direct marketing space in the last number of years. What lessons have you learned? What encouragement would you give to ag entrepreneurs out there who are looking to provide food for their local community?
I borrow this phrase from a friend of mine in Mitchell County, Georgia, which is in the southwest corner of the state. The more I know, the more I know I don't know. And that again makes every day an adventure and a learning opportunity. Continuing to regenerative agriculture is such a fitting term. Sustainable, I agree with Gabe Brown. Why would you want to sustain a broken system? Everyone in the United States is farming degraded soils. From the time that the plains were first tilled, it's gone downhill from there. Everybody's in the same boat. We're all farming a degraded system. But regenerative, you continue to see improvements. It's so exciting to walk and see all the earthworm activity and the tilth of the soil and no runoff. It's just, of course, I readily admit I'm not normal. But the good Lord gave me the ability to see what I look at. What do we do? Look at the successes of others. You know, from our standpoint of direct marketing, word of mouth is our best advertising. We do not have a website. That's my fault. I'm not home enough anymore to properly manage it, which is a primary reason. But our customer base literally continues to grow by word of mouth. And, you know, for somebody that's starting fresh, you don't have that benefit initially. But my best advice would be look for who's looking for what you have. Don't beat your head against a wall with somebody that is looking to buy what they're going to put on the table when it's on sale. Does that mean you have to spend a lot of money to feed your family? No, it doesn't. I remember my wife manages the Azure Standards Food Co-op in Orange City. And they drop products off once a month. And when our first daughter was born, she went to the first checkup for our daughter, and Dr. Willikus was our doctor, and he had a Dutch accent, and he says to my wife Pam, he says, "You spend your money on good food or you'll give it to me," which is more obvious today because of the high cost of treatment of illness. I refuse to use the word healthcare because there's no such thing in Western medicine. They do nothing to promote health. Promoting, you know, it was said, let food be thy medicine, let medicine be thy food. That's healthcare, not the stuff that's being done in Western medicine. And again, that was a hijacked or a kidnapped system that happened many, many years ago. So seek out the people that either know that the nutrient density and the cleanliness of what you feed your family is critically important, or find someone if they're having issues with a family member because of food, a food allergy, or heaven forbid, worse than that. And there's way too many food allergies. I hardly knew anybody with a food allergy when I was in school. The only anomaly was my cousin had asthma. So when he came to the farm, he didn't go in the haymow, but he could go anywhere else on the farm. So look for the people that are looking for what you have, if that makes sense.
It has been our great joy to have Howard Vlieger join us today, and we were talking in between that all of these topics could could deserve a lot more time, and so we'll definitely have to have Howard join us again at another on another webinar. Uh, Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your thoughts, your reflections as a Christian farmer, and the very fascinating projects that you've been a part of, and that piece of advice that you were able to give us here at the end, that encouragement for those who are going into this space. Howard, thank you so much for sharing your morning with us today.
Thank you, Pastor, and I feel very strongly that it's because I've been so blessed by so many amazing mentors that it's important to pay it forward, if you will, to try and share information and mentor others.
Friends, this is Pastor Christopher Morendi of the Lutheran Institute of Regenerative Agriculture. It's my great joy to bring you these webinars and other resources. We've got a lot. We're gearing up and getting ready for a lot of exciting things in the next 6 weeks. Next month, we'll have more webinars coming. Howard has connected me with Sally Fallon of the Weston A. Price Foundation. We'll be looking to have her on in the next few weeks, and we're scheduling other webinars as time goes on, and we've got some big announcements as far as the future of Lyra that will be rolling out right around the turn of the year. So keep tuned to our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, all our various communication mediums, our website, and we thank you for spending some time with us and continuing to learn about stewarding God's great gift, this creation He has given to us. Thank you so much, friends. God's blessings.